Hey, soccer fans, and welcome to a new segment here on the Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast, something we're calling right now the World Cup Time Machine, where your hosts, myself, Nick Bateris, my good friend, fellow host, Mike Guglielmi here, we're going to take a look back at all the World Cups that the USMNT has partaken in the modern era. We're not going back to 1930, we're not going back to 1950 to relive the England victory, or 1930, the third place victory. We're going to start with the 1990 World Cup, and we're going to review the American action on the world's biggest stage. So, Mike, I had a lot of fun putting these notes together. I'm sure you're excited to be talking about probably what was the first major milestone in modern American soccer, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, this was kind of the start of it all for U.S. soccer. Yeah, we had 1930, 1950, but nobody really remembers that. And this is kind of the real start. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below. Turn on notifications to not miss any of our awesome American soccer content. USMNT stuff. We've got these Time Machine episodes coming up. MLS, Liga MX, CONCACAF action. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button as well. 1990 World Cup. It was in Italy. Italia 1990, as you can see the little logo up here above me. This was the famous World Cup of West Germany getting the victory, winning the World Cup in 1990. West Germany, yes, West. They were West and East Germany. Now it's just Germany. Second place, that final, it was Germany over Argentina. Diego Maradona's Argentina. In third place was the hosts, Italy, and fourth place, England. The Three Lions could not get on the podium for this one. West Germany, your champions there in Italy. Some interesting notes on this one. It was the lowest average goals for a World Cup per game in World Cup history, in 2.2. So again, I think that kind of, Italy, they're famous for their defense and for low scoring games. So how fitting, but for Italia 1990 to be one of the lowest scoring World Cups out there. United States first World Cup since 1950. So this kind of, they had that big hiatus there from 1950 to 1990. And then throughout the years, it's been the U.S. in the World Cup every single time until, that last one in 2018.
Yeah.
We're not here.
The U.S. had one of the longest consecutive World Cup qualifications from 1990 all the way up through 2014. So it really shows what came of the United States really putting a lot of effort into World Cup 90, into qualifying, into learning from it, into building a soccer federation, into getting ready to build their own domestic league. It gave us a great run. We had 24 years of World Cup finals teams. Like that's phenomenal, and it all started here in 1990, Mike.
Yeah, so then we've got, this is kind of like the precursor to the 94 World Cup, and we'll be doing an episode on that, so make sure you guys check that one out when it comes out. The 1994 World Cup in the United States, this was like the real precursor to the big-time growth of the game in the United States, with MLS coming into fruition a few years after the 94 World Cup, but part of the plan in 94. So kind of gave a blueprint on the teams, the players, that kind of stuff. So do we want to talk about the roster first? Or do we want to talk about the games first?
Well, let's just touch real quick on the score lines, because it was really nothing to write home about for the United States. Their first World Cup in 40 years, and they were just totally outmatched. They were drawn into a group with the host country, Italy, with Czechoslovakia and Austria, two teams who you don't think of as like major world powers, but these aren't slouches either. First of all, it's the World Cup finals, so you're playing the top. Was the field here 24 teams at this point, Mike? I think it hadn't expanded yet, so you're playing the top 24 countries in the world here, and you're drawn in to a group with Italy, as well as Czechoslovakia and Austria, who have always been competitive, always put together good teams in this era as well. So for the U.S. to be there was an accomplishment. For them to win a game would have been huge, but unfortunately they went 0-3 here. They ended up losing their home opener. They ended up losing their opener 5-1 to Czechoslovakia. And hey, for you kids out there, yeah, go pick up a history book. That's where you'll find names like Czechoslovakia and West Germany. All right, they lose 5-1 to Czechoslovakia. The lone goal for the United States coming from, I think it was Paul Caligari, and then they move on to the next game. They maybe get their legs under them a little bit. They maybe weren't starstruck or awestruck of being on the big stage, and they go and they play host Italy, the favorite of the tournament. These kids who've been playing for teams like the Albany Capitals and the Milwaukee Wave are now facing world giant Italy, and the U.S. plays an extremely good game, very respectable scoreline here, losing 1-0 to Italy. And then in their third and final match, they get a little confidence. They're feeling better. We can hang with these guys. But unfortunately, they end up falling in their third and final game 2-1 to Austria. The U.S. goal there by Murray in that one. So the U.S. goes 0-3. They score 2 goals. And you know what, Mike? It's not what you wanted. But all things considered, not the worst thing. They didn't get shut out. They didn't get blown out every game. And you know what? It reintroduced the world to the United States from a soccer perspective, and reintroduced everyone in the U.S. back to soccer. So it's something they could build off of. That's kind of my impression of it. And I know as a kid, this was the first time I really got to see major international soccer. I was 5 years old at the time of this. I was, playing AYSO soccer with with the rest of my kindergarten class and my first grade buddies. Like, that's where I was. And then to be able to look and see, like, oh my gosh, like everybody in the world is playing this game, this thing that I've just started to discover and learn about. For me, it was a really cool moment and really big in my soccer fandom and my soccer playing. So that's my personal take out of it. And you just kind of look at the pictures you're putting up here on the screen, Mike, like to see just the physicality and the speed that maybe the U.S. wasn't used to really coming out in this World Cup. For me, that's kind of what I remember and what I take away as a kid watching this. Now, what are your takeaways from these group stage games? And was there anything you remember from your childhood with watching the World Cup?
I do not remember this World Cup at all. I was not introduced to soccer till really the '94 World Cup was when I started paying attention to the World Cup itself and to the U.S. men's national team. I was actually still living in Canada at this point, so that's probably why I did not know anything about it, because Canada was not in that World Cup and still has not been to a World Cup since then. But we're not here to talk about Canada. For me, what stands out, I mean, if you look at some of these action shots here, is these high shorts, man. Like, it was like kind of like taking it back to like the 70s and 80s with the NBA players and their shorts, the Daisy Dukes. You know what I mean? Like these guys, and the fact that they're not, the world football game has changed so much since 1990. These action shots of these guys, it's so cool to see, these players and the jerseys and how far technology has come, even in just 30 short years. Even though that's a really good definition on that picture up on the top left-hand side there, really clear. You can see the graininess on the right-hand side there in the Italy match. But overall, for me, I don't really know. Didn't take anything from this. I wasn't paying attention to this at that time. But it put the USMNT back on the world stage and got them prepped for the '94 World Cup.
Absolutely. And a lot of the guys who are on the 1990 roster are going to stay with the U.S. national team to that 1994 World Cup. So let's take a quick rundown now and look at the roster, look at the coach, and kind of see what stands out from that perspective here. So the head coach back in '90 was Bob Gansler. a name that I'm not too familiar with. Again, maybe you diehard soccer fans, your old school soccer fans are going to know a lot about Bob Gansler, but not someone that I knew much. But running through the roster, and it's purely by number here. That's how it was organized. So we're going to start with roster number 1, Tony Miola, the goalkeeper. Now, that's a household U.S. soccer name, not only from his playing days, but his current broadcasting days as well. So you can see the influence that this 1990 team still has in the game today. So you had Tony Miola, Steve Tricia, John Doyle, Jimmy Banks, Mike Windishman, who was the captain, John Harks, Tom Ramos, there's another big one, Brian Bliss, Chris Sullivan, Peter Vermeez, Eric Winalda, Paul Crump, Eric Eichmann, John Stolmeyer, Desmond Armstrong, Bruce Murray, Marcelo Balboa, still has some of the greatest haircuts in soccer history in the U.S., Casey Keller, Chris Henderson, Paul Caligari, Neil Cavone, and David Vinol, the backup goalkeeper there. So, Mike, a lot of those names should jump off the page to you, and we're going to get into some of these household names, but you were looking at the clubs these guys were playing for, or the universities these guys were playing for, right? Casey Keller was with an NASL Portland team. Chris Henderson was with UCLA. Neil Cavone, Wake Forest. Tony Miola, Virginia Cavaliers, the University of Virginia. He had a great story where just because he had played, I don't know if Bruce Arena was involved at that point as part of U.S. soccer. He's like, yeah, I know Miola, call him up. And like he ended up starting. Like just some college kid who just grew up playing soccer in Jersey, right? So there's a lot of cool stories like that. And by the way, go out and watch Soccer Town USA, a documentary that's free on YouTube. It gives you so much more about Miola, Harks, Ramos, and a lot of the soccer culture in New England at that time. So go check that out. But Mike, looking at that roster, guys who have had between, maybe 13, 15 caps to 30, 40 caps. Like it ran the gamut. Casey Keller, 6 caps though. So what do you take away from that roster?
Well, what I take away from the roster is it was extremely, extremely young, right? I mean, there was really no veteran presence in this roster. I mean, everybody is 21, 23, 25. There's nobody. I think the oldest one on the roster was the backup goalkeeper at 27, David Vinol. So a very young roster, which kind of set the stage for 1994, and that's what they used this World Cup for.
Right.
But for me, the teams, it's just awesome to see. I mean, when you think of MLS and what it's become now, and these diehard fan bases, the 20 to 50,000 screaming fans, it's a totally different world now than it was then, and you can see how far MLS and USMNT has come. I mean, look at all these college kids. I mean, college soccer, there's no way. Nobody that's playing college soccer right now is going to get a USMNT call-up. Not happening. That has evolved as well. The super draft is in its last legs. I doubt there will be a super draft in 2 to 3 years for MLS because the college game is just done now. You got guys like Paul Caligari who were playing in Germany for SV Meppen. Never even heard of them. I don't even know if they still exist. The San Diego Nomads for Marcelo Balboa, the Washington Stars, Baltimore Blast, Fort Lauderdale Strikers, defender Paul Crump, Real Santa Barbara. What is that? Eric Ronaldo, San Francisco Bay Blackhawks. Like, are these USL teams? Are these NASL teams? Is it NISL? Was it, what the hell were these teams? The Albany Capitals, a player, Tabaremos, in Spain for Figueres. Never heard of these teams. So really cool to see these different teams these guys came from and how young this squad was. They didn't show out very well in the 3 games. But what do you expect when you've got a really young roster that has very little experience, who's playing in a country where soccer had not quite hit the main stage yet, and I would argue it still hasn't reached that point. It's cool to see when you break down this roster.
Absolutely. And by the way, SV Meppen still exists in the German 3rd tier.
Okay.
Or Bundesliga 3.
Okay.
So there you go. But yeah, looking at some of these names, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into who kind of the big names or who we remember from this era, from this World Cup. We already talked about Tony Miola. You know, he really lent credibility when he came to the MLS. He played in 3 World Cups and is still broadcasting. He's still influencing soccer in the United States. And to me, I think really helped start the United States as being recognized for excellent goalkeeping. That started with Tony Miola.
Yeah.
John Hark's 2-time World Cup appearance, 8 years in the MLS. He's managing the Greenville Triumph in USL. So he continues his influence in American soccer and established the MLS. This is a running theme. These guys who are on this roster, they all literally started the MLS. Like Todd Ramos, right. First player ever to sign with the MLS. He immediately gave the league some credibility, and on top of bridging a culture gap between Americans and Spanish and Latin players and all that, currently coaching the Houston Dynamo. Those are the first 3 names that jumped out to me, Mike. Why don't you talk about a few of these other guys?
Yeah, so Peter Vermeez, this was his only World Cup appearance for the U.S., but still manning the sidelines at Sporting Kansas City and has been a coach there for a long, long time. One of 2 players to win MLS Cup as a player and a coach. So, a very big 7 seasons as a player, 10 seasons now as a coach. So the guy has been very well involved with MLS. Eric Winalda ran for USSF president. He played in 3 World Cups. This was his first, 94, 98 as well. Started in MLS in 96 to launch the league. And now he's with the Las Vegas Lights in the USL Championship division. And I could see him definitely making a splash in the MLS coaching ranks shortly, unless his attitude and personality kind of gets in the way there, which could happen. Marcelo Balboa from right here in Chicago, right alongside of us. This guy, he's best known for his hair. So what does that tell you about U.S. soccer in the 90s? But, he played in MLS for a long time. I think it was like 7 years. Apparently there's a story out there that Phil Anschutz, who obviously the trophy for the MLS Cup is named the Philip F. Anschutz Trophy, would only start his team if Marcelo Balboa was on the team. He's still with the Rapids organization. He's an academy coach, and he does do color commentary for the, I believe, his Altitude network there for the Rapids. I mean, Casey Keller, instrumental in Seattle. He kind of started. He spent a lot of his career in Europe, and he played for the Sounders. Came back to play for the Sounders. Was a big time signing at the time. The expansion for the Sounders, and he broadcast for the Sounders and ESPN as well. So, there's a lot of these names that were on these rosters in 1990, young kids, 20, 21, 22, 23 years old, and they're still involved in MLS 30 years later as coaches, commentators. The list goes on and on. Very, very impressive to see how these guys kind of stuck through with MLS.
For sure. And I love that Marcelo Balboa story. And for the viewers and listeners, like go look it up and find it, because when Phil Anschutz was in discussions with the league to start a team in Colorado, in Denver, he's like, the only way you get my money and you get my name supporting this franchise here in Colorado is if I get to sign Marcelo Balboa. So it tells you the influence he had, because he had just some ridiculous bicycle kick in the World Cup. It didn't go in, obviously, but it was such an amazing play. Like, that stuck out to Phil Anschutz. That was kind of the American thought process. Like, wow, look at that cool thing that this guy with the great haircut did. I want him on my sideline. I want him on my team. So clearly he was looking at it from a marketing perspective first and foremost, but also the fact that this was probably one of the best defenders that the U.S. had to offer. So he was absolutely right in insisting that he gets to sign Balboa. And for those of you who may not be too familiar with the MLS, again, it's a single entity. So these teams are not individual organizations. They're franchises within the MLS entity. So that's why he could insist that Balboa gets placed on his team, because the league owned the player contracts, not the individual clubs. So Balboa was signed with the MLS and was assigned to Colorado essentially. Obviously, Colorado's paying his paychecks and whatnot, but that is part of what helped build MLS, because they, as a league, got to go out and say, Tab Ramos, we want you to be the first ever player in our league. Sign with the league. And it was a real big leap of faith for Ramos to say yes when there wasn't a league yet.
Right.
They didn't have teams, they didn't have schedule, they didn't have stadiums. It was huge for a lot of these guys to sign on, and a lot of them at various times in early MLS were just like, okay, you're going to be part of like the MLS league, an unassigned agent essentially. But it all stems from that picture you put right there, Mike. It all stems from the 1990 World Cup, getting these guys to just understand, and getting U.S. soccer executives to understand how big the game is, and the fact that they can actually sustain this, that there's interest from a viewership and from an investor standpoint, that there's resources in stadiums and infrastructure, and it laid the foundation. This 1990 World Cup figuratively and literally laid the foundation for everything we see in U.S. soccer today. I want to remind everyone, ussoccer.com has profiles on all these players from the 1990 World Cup. We didn't get to talk about a lot of them, but there's a great profile on Desmond Armstrong. Make sure you go and check him out. I think that's him there on the right-hand side picture that you show there, Mike. But go check out those profiles. Go check out everything there. Mike, any final thoughts on this one?
No, I think we covered it pretty well for what the 1990 World Cup in Italy was for USMNT. Thanks, everybody, for watching this special episode of the 1990 Italia World Cup for USMNT, the World Cup time machine. We will be back at some point over the next few weeks with the 1994 World Cup time machine episode. So make sure you guys subscribe down below and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our awesome American soccer content. Thanks, everybody, for jumping on with us. We will talk to you all very, very soon. Good night.